I'm joined by Suzanne on the left-hand side of the screen and Alice on the right-hand side. Good evening, both.
Hi.
Hi.
Evening.
Now, just in case, it's just possible there's anybody out there who's watching tonight who hasn't watched one of these before, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have about 30 minutes or so of relatively fast-paced revision activities delivered by Suzanne and Alice. All of that is based on a PowerPoint presentation, which will be available for you to download as soon as this live stream has finished. As we're going through the questions, we are hoping to get lots of responses from you in the chat window. Let's keep the chat window just to responses to our questions tonight. That would be really useful getting this close to the exams, please. So we're hoping to see lots of responses from you. We'll try and get some of them up onto the screen as well, just to give out a shout out to those people having a good go at the questions. And this, of course, is all being recorded, so you can always watch it again and look through things in your own time. What are we thinking about tonight then, guys? What is it that we're looking at in particular?
Well, this is the paper 2 option that lots of schools are doing, which is contemporary urban environments.
Okie dokes. Okay. Right. Shall we get started?
Yeah, let's get started. Okay, so first up we have a bubble quiz, and if you haven't done one of these before, the idea is it's a bit like a multiple choice quiz question, but the number of answers that could be correct can range from 0 to 4, so a little bit different. And I really want to second what John was saying. We want to see your answers in the chat, so feel free to give us your answers. Let's have a look at the first question then. Okay, question 1 is, which of these is a feature of a sustainable city? Which of these is a feature of a sustainable city? And we have A, provision of health and education services, B, recycling, C, employment opportunities, and D, access to and green spaces. So if you want to put in the chat which answers you think are correct, I can see some people are having a go at that already. As I say, could be 0 answers are correct, could be all 4 are correct. So you need to say what you think. So L Grant says all of them. I wonder if they're right. Okay, there's a few other answers coming in there. There's quite a few people saying all of them. Shannon, Katie also saying all of them. John, are they correct? Yes, of course they are. So when we think about sustainable cities, there are 3 aspects to sustainability, of course, aren't there, in terms of economic opportunity, in terms of protection of the environment, and also thinking about community cohesion and looking after everyone within that community. And all of those tie up with those things. Think about your examples of sustainable cities. Which of those are true of Copenhagen? Which are true of Freiburg? Think about those case studies you've got. Right, question 2. Which of the following climatic conditions are typical of urban areas when compared to rural areas? Which of the following climatic conditions are of urban areas when compared to rural areas? And A says slower rates of evapotranspiration, B, less intense rainfall precipitation, C, higher temperatures, or D, on average, slower wind speeds. So again, 0 to 4 could be correct. What do you think? Let's have your ideas in the chat. So just give you a few seconds to get your answers in there. I've got a few people responding very quickly, other people having a little think about it, considering it carefully, which is always good to do with some of these questions. Serena says A and C. Harley Dale says 2 of them as well there, A and C. Is A and C correct, John? Right, C and D are correct. So there were a few naughty distractors there, weren't there? Higher temperatures. We talk about something called the urban heat island effect, don't we? Which is where urban areas which have a lower albedo with extensive dark surfaces often have a higher temperature. Think about all that tarmac. We've got large expanses of glass and steel reflecting heat into surrounding streets, and with far less vegetation than rural areas and drains removing surface water, we've got less heat energy being lost in the process of evapotranspiration. How can D be correct, you're saying to me? Well, let's look at the phrasing on average slower wind speeds. So we know that in some areas winds are gusty and they're channeled by urban structures, but in general urban structures are disrupting and creating shelter in our cities. Right, question 3 then, please. Which of these are megacities? So we've got A, Kinshasa, B, Chongqing, C, Tokyo, and D, Berlin. So some of these you may not have heard of, and so you might be making an educated guess. Think about where in the world they might be from, how large a city are they, and what defines a megacity? Maybe you can put that in the chat. What defines a megacity? How do you know if these are megacities or not? Straight away we've got a note from L Grant saying a megacity is over 10 million population. Thank you for that. So we're looking for cities with a population over 10 million. Okay, so lots of people thinking Tokyo might be in that bracket, but what about the other 3? Okay, so in fact, Kinshasa, Chongqing, and Tokyo are all megacities. So all of them except Berlin, Berlin being the capital of Germany, but only with a population of 3.8 million. Kinshasa is the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it's the largest city in that Central African country. Tokyo, lots of us were really sure on, and of course that was one of the world's first megacities alongside New York. And then Chongqing is one of our new joiners to the list, of course, in central China. It's a municipality that's the size of Austria. But if we look at the actual definition of the city proper, it now makes that grade of 10 million people or more. It's a huge base for manufacturing logistics in central China, if you haven't heard of it, and it's on the Yangtze River. Okay, question 4. Which of the following are possible effects of urban structures and layout on wind? So we're back to thinking about urban climates. Which of the following are possible effects of urban structures and layout on wind? So does that include A, swirls, B, channeling, C, Venturi effect, D, turbulence? Which ones of those are familiar when you think about urban climates and specifically microclimates, perhaps? Okay. Quite a few going for B and C, and I have seen a couple of B, C, Ds there as well. People thinking A might be a bit unfamiliar. Yes, SpongeBob said BCD, Monkey Man 418 said BCD as well. Let's have a look, John. Yeah, so if you said BCD, you're absolutely right. When we think about the very local impacts of urban structures, channeling does occur, which leads to an increase in wind speeds very locally and turbulence for pedestrians on the ground. The Venturi effect is that idea of wind being intensified when funneled through small openings. And this is all sort of unintended consequences of planners and architects. Question 5, please. So this is our last bubble quiz question. Which of these are indicators or measures that contribute to the English index of multiple deprivation? Now, this might be something that you've come across with the changing places topic, as well as the urban topic. Which of these are indicators or measures that contribute to the English index of multiple deprivation? A, crime, B, income, C, ecological footprint, D, barriers to housing and services. What do we think? Lots of people going for 3, but different 3s. Well, no, there's a bit of a consensus coming down on ABD. So we're thinking that maybe ecological footprint might not be in there as part of those 7 indicators of deprivation or poor quality of life across England. Okay, let's have a look at the answers then. Great, so if you said A, B, D, which lots of people did, You are well aware that crime is feeding into that, and clearly the police have statistics on crimes that are very, very specific to local neighbourhoods. So we're talking about a size of area that is smaller than an electoral ward. And this index of multiple deprivation ranks all of those neighbourhoods across England, and gives you a sense of where people who have a poor quality of life are living. Income's very relevant to that, and we can see that when we're thinking about poverty in England. But barriers to housing and services is a particularly geographical indicator, and that's about how far you are from key services like a hole in the wall for your banking, or a post office, or a supermarket. Makes us think about food deserts and things like that within cities. Okay, so that's the end of our bubble quiz, I believe, but we have something else for you to think about when we're thinking about this idea of economic inequality within our cities. So we need to know about patterns of economic inequality linked to our case studies, but we also need to know about what are the strategies that people use to make things better, to address this issue of economic inequality. So I'm going to let you have a look at these three arguments, and I want you to rank them by kind of how important or how useful you think these strategies are, and which argument kind of you'd be leading with. So if you thought perhaps C was the best argument, you might put C1 and give me a reason, or maybe you're just going to give me a listing, so all the letters and then the numbers 1 to 3. Let's have a look at them. So we've got ensuring. A is ensuring affordable housing is the most effective strategy to reduce social and economic inequalities in urban areas. So that's one argument, that really the key strategy is about making sure affordable housing is available. The second argument's around the living wage and incomes, isn't it? The introduction of a living wage is crucial to raising the income of the poorest and reducing urban inequalities. Do you think that is the most important one? Thank you to Digimon She. You've just given us your order. That's great. Community-led urban regeneration schemes that identify specific social and economic needs are best placed to reduce economic inequalities. Would you be leading with that argument? Maybe if you can give me your answer, your order, you'd perhaps put your case study in that would links to your strongest strategy. Why do you think B is your first choice strategy? Can you think about which practical example you'd be using to exemplify that? Good, so we've got some detailed answers coming in now, justifying your answers, which is great. Shall we have a look at what we went with? Okay, so our own podium finish lineup was starting with C, community-led urban regeneration schemes that identify specific social and economic needs are best placed to reduce economic inequalities. And so you're essentially saying local people know in the greatest level of detail what they need to help them back into work, or help them with specific needs like housing, rather than outsiders sort of telling them what they need. This idea, the second one, B, the introduction of the living wage is crucial. That might be something that you would go with. But actually, I was reading recently that this ensuring affordable housing is really where the UK's got things wrong in terms of the homelessness crisis. And someone was making the argument that essentially countries like Finland and Austria have built so many more affordable houses, and that has actually addressed a lot of economic inequality, and maybe that's what the UK is getting wrong. So it's one of these questions, Suzanne, isn't it, where there's no wrong answer. You just need to be able to back up what you think with some case study answers.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's just as well. If you take a look at some of the language that's being used there, you can see that it's quite evaluative, which is obviously what the examiner's looking for as they read through your response. So yeah, the word is crucial, is best placed, and whereas it is the most effective. So think about making sure that you're using vocabulary that shows that you're evaluating and you're kind of ranking whilst you're discussing each of the different ideas as you go through your possibly 20-mark essays. This could come up as how have strategies addressed urban economic inequalities.
And not saving all your evaluation for the conclusion.
No, absolutely, because the examiner again will be very pleased to see lots of evaluation as you go through. I often think the kind of final sentence of a paragraph is the perfect position to put some of that evaluation kind of drawing together an analysis issue or of the strategy or whatever it is that the paragraph's kind of main theme is on, and ensuring that you are evaluating at that point, because by the time you get to the conclusion, for some of you, the timing is really, it could be against you, and if you're just waiting for that conclusion to evaluate and you run out of time, you could really impact on your 20 marker.
That's key, isn't it? Okay, so John, I think we've got one more kind of quick fire to have a go at. Oh, brilliant. So we've got 60 seconds to match the key phrases to their definition. So just like all the other geography topics, this topic's got its own key terms, got its own language. Got a 60-second challenge here. 5 words. Can you match them to the correct definition? Okay, so 60 seconds goes past pretty quickly, doesn't it? Let's have your answers. Okay, lots of people going for all 5. So well done for you. It's kind of quick typing as well as reading to be done. So should we have a look, John, at what the correct matchup is? Thank you. So, of course, a world city is not exactly like a megacity. A megacity is a large one. Remember, a large population, larger than 10 million people. A world city is different. A city which has influence on a global scale, economically, culturally, and politically. Now, it may well be a megacity as well, but not all of them are. They might just be a centre for culture or a centre for global finance systems. Decentralization is a process we study within this topic. It's about the movement of population and industry away from the urban centre to surrounding areas, so movement out of the inner city. Dereliction might be something that happens as a result in the inner city. So it's the abandonment of buildings, infrastructure, and land, which becomes dilapidated. And you might have been thinking about this term dereliction in terms of changing places as well, perhaps. Livability is about the characteristics of urban living that make life easier and more comfortable. So to do with quality of life. And our example there is political stability. And then E4, social cohesion is the degree that groups of people are connected and feel part of a community. Great. Well done if you got all of those right.
Right, okay, it's over to me. Just on the referring back to some of those key terms, AQA have actually published a new updated glossary for 2024. So do have a look through and make sure that you've read and you know all the definitions for the terms that they've popped into that. Obviously, some of the terms that they're using are in there. Anyway, where are these contemporary urban environments questions? Well, they're the last question that you will see if you are doing the exam in kind of a linear order. So they'll be in section C. So your section A is your global systems and global governance. Your section B is changing places. So this is an optional question because there are some other options. So you will probably ignore the last two questions on the back of the paper, but you will make sure you head for section C. It's nice and easy because it's the third one straight after changing places. Very, very similar that the first question is going to be a 4-mark question. That will just be on AO1, so that's assessing your knowledge and understanding. Usually might be an explain, an outline type question. You'll then go straight into a 6-mark question, which will be something where a figure is being used, whether that's one figure or multiple figures. And that will be where you apply your AO3 skills. So your analyze questions should be that first 6-marker. You'll then be confronted with 2 9-markers. Now, some of these can have a figure with them. And it's likely one may have a figure and possibly the other one won't, and it will be using the figure and your own knowledge style question. So you would need to interpret and use the question as a springboard in order to develop some of your own knowledge and understanding to answer the question. And the other 9-mark question is very likely to be a synoptic question. Now, the exam board really likes synoptic questions where they link different parts of either the specification, so they can link paper 1 topics with some of the paper 2, or they could be linked within paper 2. So, for example, I'm going to show you in a minute an example of a changing places concept that has been used within a contemporary urban environments. You will not find contemporary urban environments concepts or topics within changing places or global systems and global governance, as contemporary urban environments is an option that not everyone will be studying. And finally, just like your other units, you'll be doing a 20-mark question, 10 marks available for your AO1, your knowledge and understanding, AO2 for your kind of evaluation aspects. Right, so we're going to have a look at an example of one of these synoptic style exam questions here. So this question here, to what extent have urban policies in the UK since 1979 affected place meaning in urban areas? So we can see there that what we've got is the aspect of the syllabus of urban policies in the UK since 1979, very specific, but you need to make sure that you have a good knowledge and understanding of consecutive policies that have occurred in the UK in cities, particularly in the inner cities, since that 1979 date. So anything that predates 1979, you wouldn't be talking about. And how it's affected place meaning. Now, place meaning is drawn from the changing places part of the syllabus. So it's kind of one of these synoptic questions where you're having to apply some of that kind of conceptual understanding about what is place meaning to a aspect of perhaps knowledge that you know about the different urban policies, where they are, maybe a named example, and kind of what the changes were of that policy, and interpret therefore what you think the changes in place meaning might have been as a result of those policies. Right, now every good geographer's bug, the command word. So let's have a look. Here we go. So to what extent, of course, is an evaluation? So that's making us look at or express a view of examining the evidence that we have in terms of the urban policies and thinking about whether they do or don't, also whether they have or haven't affected place meaning in those specific areas that you're probably going to be naming. Okay. Urban policies, we're going to run through now, and we'll kind of link it very quickly to some of that place meaning. So if we go back to post 1979, so we're really starting in the 1980s, we're looking at a period in the UK where the majority of the policies that the government came up were really, really quite they were very wide ranging. So they were giving powers for very large redevelopments of inner cities, because they felt that perhaps deindustrialization had led to inner city decline, which had meant that really some quite radical actions were needed to regenerate and redevelop these areas. And one of the sort of delivery mechanisms they decided to use was really to use private investment, and that was often property led, so commercial properties leading through companies pushing forward with their own plans of what they wanted and needed in some of these inner city areas. Can sometimes be not necessarily what the local residents or the original communities or needed, it was often kind of imposed upon them. So, for example, you may have looked at urban development corporations and some of those very large things like the London Docklands, where the whole area was pretty much knocked down, other than some kind of key historical buildings that were retained, and the land use functions were entirely altered. And the majority of the original residents ended up being moved out or pushed out, or sometimes we use the word displaced. Thinking about place meaning there, we're probably thinking that actually place meaning really changed if the land use was completely different, from industrial functions to kind of finance or service sectors. There was a complete change in the way the land was used, the way people used it, the types of people who were using it. And even though some elements of the older parts of kind of the more historical buildings were retained, actually very often they were repurposed. So they might have kind of apartments put into some of the older warehouses. Now we move through into the 1990s, and I think at this point there was an understanding that some of these that had been totally driven by really economic needs needed a little bit more of stakeholder input from local communities and other stakeholders within the area. So they focus slightly more here on economic and social regeneration. So you can see that social aspect has crept in. So again, you might want to have a think about a policy that you've studied. City Challenge could be one of them. And again, how successful was that in creating new place meaning? Was that altered? In the 2000s, based on some of the experience of both the 1980s and the 1990s, arguably there was much more emphasis on including local communities, because I guess the 1980s and 1990s policies for local communities haven't been particularly successful. They could see flaws and they could see areas where they hadn't really provided what local communities needed. So we have local communities being much more involved, and we creep in here more focus on sustainable development. How in scale, many of these areas that received money or funding were much, much smaller. So nothing like the London Docklands kind of scale of change and improvement. And again, communities, some of them benefited, but very often we also have lots of people, as an area improves, house prices rise, and people are displaced to move out. So again, something that felt like home might not actually stay feeling like home. You might go from being an insider to feeling like an outsider. So you can start bringing in some of those terms from Changing Places. And finally, you can see in 2010, almost like a complete change of focus from that very, very economic, commercial driven policies in the 1980s, where we actually have complete devolved power down to local authorities, and the importance of community-led planning and regeneration, asking people what they needed, why they needed, and trying to provide that. Arguably, if you're thinking of evaluating the extent to which these policies have changed place meaning, you could look at all of them and kind of mention and name drop how they might have changed things in terms of those locations. But I would argue probably the 2010 retained more place meaning or original place meaning than the earlier policies. You could argue the 1980s policies completely imprinted a new identity and a brand new sense of place into those areas. And obviously for some they were winners and some they were losers. Right, okay, so hopefully ties up the urban policy. If we can have a look, John, at our next slide. We're going over, but I think this is back to you, Alice, isn't it, for a 3, 2, 1?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, that's a really interesting question to think about, isn't it? Linking those two topics.
Yeah, I'd quite like to write an essay on
that. Well, whatever you want to do with your evening, Suzanne. Right, 3, 2, 1. So a bit more quick fire for us here. You're going to have 90 seconds to answer 3 questions. 1 question's asking for 3, 1 question's asking for 2, and 1 question's asking for 1. So we're after 3 land uses in a mixed development town centre. So thinking about our new urban landscapes there. 2 impacts of counter-urbanisation, and 1 process associated with economic decline in urban areas. And your 90 seconds starts now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Great, great. Well done for those people who got off the blocks very quickly and gave us answers to the first one. And I noticed, Rebecca, you went for the first 2 questions, so well done. And someone else, Serena's already given us answers to all 3. But let's have a look at our first one then. So our first one was, give me 3 land uses in a mixed town centre development. So lots of people had this idea of retail. I mean, leisure could actually be a separate use, couldn't it, if we think about a leisure centre or something like that, but often these things are combined. Commercial land uses, so you might have had industrial units or offices. And also residential homes, so thinking about the combination of homes, workspaces, and leisure spaces or retail spaces, all being within the same mixed development within a town centre. So this is one of our new urban landscapes we need to know about. Of course, there are other urban landscapes we need to know about, like cultural and heritage quarters, fortress developments, gentrified areas, and edge cities. But equally, we might have to focus on one of them in a question. So we did well on that one. What about the 2? We needed 2 impacts of counter-urbanisation. And looking at the chat, we have done well on the idea of urban sprawl. Lots of people got that, and some comments also about rising house prices. So this idea of people moving back into the cities and what that does in terms of perhaps creating areas which are changing in character, changing in population, and if you've got more people wanting to buy properties, rising house prices within those city areas. Lastly, we were asked after one process associated with economic decline in urban areas. And this is all tied up, of course, because Suzanne was talking about the way that perhaps the Conservative government in 1979 was responding to that period of deindustrialisation taking place in UK cities. What processes do people have? We had decentralisation. Yeah, some people have talked about dereliction, and clearly that was related to deindustrialisation, as we've already heard. Okay, well done. Lots of answers in the chat, and well done to you at home if you're watching on Catch Up.
This before. In a minute, we're going to have a word revealed in the centre and some words around the outside. We're going to try and work out what the connection is between them. So, John, can you reveal our first connection spinner? Okay, so we've got urban hydrology in there. So that's understanding the kind of hydrologic features in order to be able to plan and manage in urban areas. And around our outside, you can see we've got precipitation, we've got storm hydrographs, recreation and leisure, water pollution and quality, urban governance, and sustainable drainage systems, known as SUDS. So all of those are aspects of the syllabus that you will need to be familiar with when we're thinking about water in urban areas and how our urban areas affect the water cycle. Right, okay, so let's see what our first connection we've got to make is, what's it going to land on? Right, storm hydrograph. So I'd love to see in the chat box, please, some connections you think there might be between urban hydrology and storm hydrographs. Okay. Let's see how we get on with this one. Have we got anything yet, John? So have a think. How might you connect those two? How might you connect the ways in which we kind of plan and manage and a storm hydrograph? Oh, I've got some stuff coming in now. Brilliant. Oh, great stuff. Thank you, El Grant. We do indeed need to understand the permeability of urban land surfaces. And absolutely thinking about that storm hydrograph, Tom W. thinking about very flashy rivers. So let's have a little reveal, please, John, what we thought you might put in there. So I think it's really important that when we're looking at urban areas, those and hydrologists really need to understand the hydrographs of very specific areas of the city and across the whole city, because they're the ones that are planning where and what we need to do. And of course, storm hydrographs can show us whether a river channel or a river system is flashy, because it will have a very steep rising limb, a very short lag time, and therefore can very, very easily result in flooding in urban areas, or certainly flooding actually downstream of urban areas, because sometimes it just moves the problem onwards. And I think, what's important here as well is when we're kind of building cities is to think about the surfaces. So are there impermeable surfaces that we're creating? And considering whether there are perhaps other options. So lots of people there's a sort of lots of new products on the market which allow you to create driveway surfaces or pathways which are actually permeable, so it reduces the risk of creating lots of surfaces that aren't going to allow water to infiltrate. And obviously storm drains, a big job of urban hydrologists is to work out how and where to take water to, and storm drains actually really speed up flows so they can result in really rapid river discharge. So those are all important things to consider with urban hydrology. Right, let's have another go and spin our wheel and see what we get this time. Ooh, where's it going? Is it going to start? Brilliant. Okay, right. So have a think and pop into the chat box what you think might be the connection between urban governance and urban hydrology. Okay, so have a think about that. We've spun the wheel now, El Grant. Have a think. What do you think that link might be, or the connection between urban governance? Is it important in looking at urban hydrology? What could be that link? Right. I think this one might. Oh no, we've got one. Thank you, Tom W. I thought I was just talking to an empty room then. Brilliant. Okay, so we do indeed need to think about some of those infrastructure that supports the urban hydrology, and absolutely bad governance can cause terrible flooding issues, can't it? And even thinking about granting planning permission in locations which are going to increase the risk of flooding, building on the floodplain, that's going to be really important, thinking about where how much, again, the links back to the impermeable surfaces. And also you think that some of urban governance is going to be impacted by international organisations and agreements, because we have certain different countries, and certainly the UK has different agreements around water quality. So let's have a look what we popped out. Oh, I've got loads coming up now. So many I can't read them quickly. Yes, so stormwater regulations. Thank you, Ali. Again, urban governance, yeah, investing in flood defences and SUDs. Thank you, Monkey Man. Local government needs to focus on flood risk. Absolutely, thank you. And climate adaptation plans, absolutely. Thinking about resilience, isn't it? And how we build in kind of resilience, particularly with climate change. Think about the fact that these areas are going to have much higher levels of precipitation because of that kind of convectional uplift. And on the whole, although precipitation isn't high, the intensity of precipitation which does occur in urban areas can be very intense, and urban areas are much more likely to have thunderstorms. Right, we can see there we decided connections were some aspects to do with water management, making sure that the water supply was good quality. I'm afraid if any of you have been following the news recently, you'll see that actually down in, I think it's Devon, is it, Alice? They've actually got an outbreak of a parasite through their water supply down there. I think the water company is going to have its hands wrapped, probably some fines placed on it because it hasn't ensured quality water supply. Obviously, wastewater treatment is also a huge thing at the moment. Again, if any of you are interested and quite focused on environmental aspects, we'll see rivers routinely being filled with sewage every time there's heavy rainfall. And obviously, there's a large amount of sewage created in these urban areas. And we have discussed stormwater infrastructure already and talking about how important it is for kind of councils or the city authorities to plan these things really, really carefully to ensure that they're putting enough money aside and that they're allowing the best buildings to be built, going to work in conjunction with the urban hydrology, not kind of work against it. Right, okay, and let's do one more spin. Let's do one more spin for fun. Let's see what we can get here. Okay, right, go John. Oh, recreation and leisure. Okay, what do you reckon that connection is? Have a little think. So I'll wait for some great ideas. You lot tonight, it's some really strong stuff that I've been seeing on the live feed. Very, very good. Some really strong geographers. Right. Let's have yes, Serena, that's the case study I do. Well done. Now I am not going to say that I can pronounce it. So do you know how to pronounce it, Alice? The South Korean river that begins with a C.
Oh, I'm not sure about that one. Sorry.
It's on the screen at the moment, Serena's. I get it wrong every single time. So if any of you do the South Korean river, it's a really good example that's coming up. I'll be honest, Serena, I'm not quite sure that's spelt correctly, but we get the idea. It's a really, we are using some of those green spaces, aren't we, to in parks to manage stormwater. Totally an enjoyable recreational space. Let's have a little look what we came up with here. So we have massive opportunity to use rivers in our urban environments to provide recreation and leisure. And part of your syllabus actually asks you very explicitly that you need to have a river restoration project, which is why the South Korean, the river in Seoul in South Korea, again, I'm not going to pronounce it, is so important as a case study because it shows such a great example of how really clever kind of thoughtful process of creating this amazing resource right in the center of South Korea went from being really an area which was heavily polluted. The river was almost dead. There was barely anything in it. It was underneath a motorway, hidden underground. And they have created this most amazing public space, created an amazing sensor place, links to changing places as well, in the centre of Seoul in South Korea. So lots of opportunities for us to use and plan and use and manage urban hydrology to create leisure and recreation. Some of you might have also done like the Olympic Park in Stratford in London. Again, huge amounts of water they're using there, different kind of like different ponds and swales. They've got different like embankments that there will be filled with water during rainfall periods, but actually as well, it's just an amazing park for recreation and leisure. Green and blue spaces combined together. Right, okay, if we can move on, John, we'll have a little look at the next one. So this is another thinking about some of the exam questions. Now, we don't often do 4 markers. We usually focus on those longer mark questions. So I thought tonight would be good to actually go through what the exam board need for a 4 mark question, because I think sometimes we can get a bit carried away with some of those key words in the question and perhaps not focus on what the question is asking us. So here's our question. Outline the characteristics of an area undergoing urban resurgence. So urban resurgence, again, is the terms used in the syllabus. So let's have a look. The command word outline means provide a brief account of, okay? And the other key word there is looking at characteristics. Now, it's really important, and AQA have emphasised this. I think they produced something a couple of years ago that said that lots of students were defining some of the key words instead of diving straight into actually talking about what the question was asking them. So if it's not asking you for a definition, then probably it's not worth wasting time doing that. Just get straight on with answering the question, addressing the question. So if the command word isn't defined or similar, then just go get on with what the question is asking you. And here we're looking at characteristics of an area, and that's thinking about some of those key features and properties which are very, very specific to an urban area in urban resurgence, so experiencing the process of urban resurgence. Right, if we can just look at some of the AO1. Now, this is obviously going to be given 4 marks. Of AO1. So this is your knowledge and understanding. So thinking about areas of urban resurgence, these are actually often pretty large scale investment programs that are used, again, can link with those urban policies in 1979 in the UK, but they're very often used to regenerate the inner city. Now, one of the characteristics or the features is that investment and that improvement means that lots of people begin to move to the area. So we can also have there's sort of the in-migration of particular individuals or groups who buy up some of the older property. It's often very cheap because it's run down, it's probably a bit kind of old, and it could be do good to have it done up, and obviously improve the amount of equity people have in their properties. So that means that these areas, we see lots of renovation, improvement of the housing, and those commercial buildings, and that's all linked to gentrification. So all those individuals moving into an area to buy up property. Very often, some of the historic buildings can be repurposed, as I spoke about the London Docklands earlier, exactly the same with that, with warehouses being turned into apartments, potentially. They've done this by looking at a number of different areas. So stability, which they account or they allocate 25% of the score from stability, and that's to do with things like crime and conflict. Healthcare, which is given 20% of the score, which it does what it says on the tin, is to do with access to both private and public healthcare. Culture and environment. Now, this one was quite interesting because it covers quite a wide range of things. And this was looking at climatic factors within a city, but was also looking at corruption, sporting availability, and also food and drink. So that seems to encompass a large number of different aspects of livability. And again, I think Alice had talked about food deserts earlier, so areas which perhaps, you know, it's difficult or is much further away from some of those key services and resources that people might need. We've got education Again, it's what you think it is. But infrastructure there is to do with roads and public transport, housing, energy, water, and telecommunications. So all of those things are kind of wrapped up into a kind of special algorithm, and out pops Mike. It was my son last week, John and Alice, but this week it's now my dog who's decided to disturb me. Sit down. And we're drawing on there on those and the scores that the cities get. Now, interestingly, Vienna is number one city in 2023. We don't know what 2024 is. Oh, need a drum roll for that one. It also won it in 2022. Auckland in New Zealand 2021, and actually Melbourne in Australia won it for 7 years in a row from 2011 to 2017. It's very interesting that the cities that dominate the livability index, the ones right at the top, are very much in Western world. And also quite interesting that not that many are ones which we would perhaps consider as being some of the examples that we see in textbooks of sustainable cities. There are a few, but for example, when I looked in the top 10, Osaka in Japan is in there. And again, there's very little, I think, in some of the textbooks and literature about Osaka being a particularly sustainable city. So thinking about that crossover. Sustainable cities, hopefully you're aware, is about how we use our current resources. We need to make sure if a city is sustainable, we're not going to be jeopardizing future generations' ability to be able to use similar resources, and often leads to a focus on the economic, social and environmental sustainability. It's often talked about the kind of the three pillars of sustainability when looking at cities. So we're looking at that kind of crossover to see how many of the elements of livability are characteristic of sustainable cities, and there should be a really strong entwined link between those two, because ultimately sustainable cities are trying to improve the life and life chances of people, which of course, being a livable city, one would hope would be quite a high feature. But if we can just go on to our next slide. Oh, sorry, that one, I've sort of talked about that one. Yeah, so we're looking at how intertwined those three things are. So finally, we need to think about how much sustainable cities, how far they are along the kind of road to impacting on livability, because without doubt, sustainable cities can fall short in either specific locations within the city. So thinking again of like your, more localized scale to looking at the sort of scale of the whole city, something that you need to do for the 20 markers, not so much on the 9 markers, but it's always good to have in your mind about sort of different sizes of scale. But even in sustainable cities, you might have areas of the city or pockets in the city that actually fall quite short of those sort of aspects of livability, and things that can kind of derail some of these ability to be sustainable or provide livable urban areas are rapid urbanisation, where the services and facility provision can't keep up with the rate at which an urban area is growing. And even though a city might be quite livable, actually that can decrease in a very short space of time if those service and facility provisions aren't sort of built into future planning. Also, challenges of overcoming economic and social inequality. That kind of brings us back to some of those things right at the beginning of this session, considering how do we overcome those, because livability surely is about being able to have access to those whole range of different things that ensure that your life is really happy and comfortable. And finally, we need to acknowledge that actually waste management and environmental degradation, when we have large groups of people very concentrated in urban spaces, it is inevitable that we are going to have real challenges over those things. And of course, the environment being part of one of those livability aspects could be degraded by the growth of cities, which becomes perhaps uncontrollable. Right, okay, so I think that draws us to an end, doesn't it, Alice? Do you want to just say where all the exciting resources they can get are located?
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. That was a really detailed session on question technique and some possible questions. If you need more on this topic, because we've got a little while until paper 2, and for some of us this urban topic is a challenging one, Suzanne has been involved in 2 other sessions. I've got the title on the slide there: Urban Policy and Regeneration and Sustainable Urban Development. So those are the names of previous Tutor to You live streams that you could go and get and have a look at. The QR code actually takes you to the whole library of all our past live streams, but you know of 2, and there are several more that link to this Q topic. And we've got people biking in Copenhagen there, thinking about examples of sustainable cities. Fun fact, you're not legally required to wear a helmet.
Oh wow! I have to say, Copenhagen does actually feature on the livability score. It's in the top 10. I think it might be possibly like number 3 or something. So
so that's an example of doing both sustainability and livability. Yeah. Oh.
Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. Listen, thank you to everybody who's contributed to tonight's live stream. Massive thank you to everybody who's been putting their thoughts and suggestions into the chat window. That's been very valuable, and we've enjoyed reading it and trying to put it up on screen. Apologies if I didn't get your answers up on there. And of course, a massive thank you to both Suzanne and Alice for delivering the questions and the exam advice tonight. We have another live stream next Monday, Alice, I'm right?
We have one more live stream. It won't be of interest to students here, but if there's any teachers watching, if you're interested in the population and environment topic, or suddenly perhaps if you're a student you're watching the wrong one, we're doing population and the environment next Monday, which is one of the other popular paper 2 options. But most people who watch this, best of luck with paper 2, and do pause and make sure you're question before you launch into your answer, and take a moment to plan those 9 and 20 markers.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So quite right, Alice. Probably most people who are watching this right now won't be with us next week. So the absolutely correct thing to do is to wish everybody who is watching us and who has contributed the very best of luck with your exams coming up very, very soon. From Suzanne, from Alice, from myself, thanks once again, and goodbye, everybody.
Thanks.